It struck me when you used the words peacemaking is not for the faint-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you yourself are an academic.
That's right.
You studied comparative literature. That's what you did.
And medieval.
And medieval literature. You learned Old English.
Yes.
And I don't know how you became a politician, because that certainly was not your trajectory. You came back to Palestine. You founded the Department of English. You then became dean at Birzeit University. And then, before you know it, you were thrust into the field of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the students yesterday asked, how can you, what does comparative literature, how does it prepare us for the real world?
Mm-hmm.
And you said that literature helps one understand the real world.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about this relationship between the academic side of you and the political side? And
Yeah, well, to me, I mean, it's no secret. Literature gives you added awareness and prepares you to deal with the real world. In a sense, you deal with truths rather than with facts, because sometimes facts can be deceptive and can be abused. But you need to get through the facts to the truths behind them. And it seems to me that's the purpose of real politics. You look at the human dimension. You look at what makes people's lives worth living, rather than just serving oneself in a system of power and trying. To us, to Palestinians, politics is not a choice. I tried to explain that yesterday. It's our life. I mean, look, ever since I was growing up in Palestine, I knew that we had lost 78% of Palestine. I was living in the West Bank. My father told me eventually, we think Israel is going to occupy the rest of Palestine. And I couldn't believe this, you know. I saw those lights, and how could they take over the rest of Palestine? There's law, there are people, there's the world. They're not going to allow such a thing to happen, but it did happen.
in 1967.
In 1967, and I was an undergraduate at the American University of Beirut, and I couldn't go home. So it had a direct impact on my life. And we heard that my house was being bombed and shelled. We heard that my family was killed. And we couldn't even communicate. My sister and I were at the university, and we didn't know what was happening. So it's something that's so immediate, so personal. It's not an abstraction. It's your house, your family, your parents, your sisters, your life, your ability to go home. And then I joined the General Union of Palestine Students in Beirut. I ran for elections. I became a delegate. And from then on, it's part of my life. The whole impetus, the whole drive was to be able to go home. I finished my studies at Beirut, and I went to the University of Virginia to do my PhD. But all the time I was thinking, how can I go home? And my parents were thinking, how can they bring me home? So it was really, and of course when I got home, I got arrested, as you know, and repeatedly. But at least I was able to go home, because to me that's the rootedness, you know, that's where I could be. I could make a difference. I don't even think of myself as a politician. I love the academic world. I studied even esoteric subjects. I like research. I like being with students and an academic environment. And it's our life. Either you're a victim, and you're a passive victim, and you accept the oppression and living in a massive prison and deprived of your rights and your freedoms, or you do something about them. And literature and the academic world should give you a sense of responsibility and engagement. You have to have knowledge, and knowledge is responsibility, not power. And you have to deal with all these truths, and you have to be transformative. You have to change your conditions, your surroundings. So I chose not to be a passive victim. I chose to be an active, sort of, I don't want to say shaper of reality, but to influence our reality, because that's too pretentious.
Well, Brown students come in really wanting to make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And they don't immediately understand, perhaps, at least some of them, what do the humanities or even the social sciences have to do with shaping the world. But from your experience, it's the ability to understand this world, to look at the truths behind
the facts.
The facts, and to know how to make a difference through
Yeah.
the process of taking responsibility through critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To engage the world, you
but-
don't escape it, you
Right.
engage it in a different way, yes.
Instead of floating on the current, you can become a swimmer, let's say.
Absolutely.
But for you, there was a double challenge, not just from academia to politics, but also being a woman.
Ah, yeah.
So a woman in that part of the world being involved in politics is not
Not easy at all.
Not
no.
easy, yes.
Mm.
So how has it been for you?
Look, I've had a support system. I'm privileged. I come from a family that has been liberated for a long time. My father, even before he got married, wrote about women's rights and how women have the right to be equal. It's not a gift from the men. It's not a condescending gift. And even before he got married and had 5 daughters. But he raised us to have faith in ourselves. He said, I've never placed limits or restrictions on your abilities and what you can do and your behavior. Don't accept these limits and restrictions and constraints by anybody else. So that's how we moved. And he took it for granted that we will all be educated, we will all go to universities, we will all make our way in this world. And that's how he raised us. We're independent. That is the fortunate part. But I live in a society that is predominantly male-dominated, predominantly patriarchal, with overt discrimination against women. But at the same time, within that society, you have, number one, a history of struggle by women who are known as, women revolutionaries, who are role models. You also have women's organizations and institutions dating back to the 1920s, but the early 20th century, but also evolving with a gender agenda since the 70s of women's rights. So I worked within a collective of women. I never worked individually. And I always made sure whatever I did opened doors for other women. But at the same time, it's very easy within this society to find very cheap ways of fighting women, particularly using traditions, because in a traditional and quite often tribal society like ours.
Tradition, yes.
Yes, you use traditions to limit, to curtail. What? Examples about women's behavior, issues of shame and culture.
Yeah.
And shame and honor. In Palestine, and like in many Arab and traditional societies, shame and culture, shame and honor are defined in relation to women's behavior. So it's a very conservative social approach to women, particularly sexual behavior and freedom and so on. So the Intifada and other ways of political work transformed the concept of shame and honor. Yeah. That honor is how you defend the honor, the dignity of your own nation, the freedom of your people, not how women's social behavior reflects on the honor of the family. Shame has to be internalized into a sense of guilt and self-knowledge, but not shame into what will people say so these current, many different political transformations also led to social transformations and cultural changes.
Well, it's not unusual in times of political emergency. For example, the first Intifada, 1987 to 91 or so, in which there's a massive uprising, civil disobedience against the occupation, for the society to say, yes, women should be involved because we need them.
Yes.
But what happens when you have something like Oslo come about and a Palestinian Authority come about and say, okay, now
go back
you've
to the
delivered us
kitchen.
here, go back to the kitchen.
Yes.
So
this happened throughout the world. I mean, look, in Algeria, in Second World War, and so on, in Europe, in the States even, when women are needed to be at the forefront, yes, they are tolerated and encouraged quite often to take risks. When there are situations of crisis and danger, people have no problems having women take risks, take responsibility, and so on. But when there are fruits or rewards to be gained, then you want to put women back in their place, so to speak. And it happens, yes. So we were told that we have national issues that have to be resolved before we deal with social issues.
Yes.
That we had issues of immediate threat and danger that cannot be postponed, and there are other issues that can be postponed until we are free. Our argument was that no, it's the same mentality. If you are if you are fighting for freedom, self-determination, human dignity, and human rights, and so on, you cannot withhold these things from half your population.
Right.
It's consistent. You're fighting the mentality of discrimination and oppression. You cannot practice these things against women. And that was our argument. Mm. So we linked self-determination and freedom with the women's struggle. And it was extremely difficult because there are built-in resistance, forms of resistance to women. Women are generally measured by more stringent standards. Women have to be perfect. I can remind you when Yasser Arafat used to ask me all the time to join his cabinet. I always resisted being appointed to an official position. Only once I accepted being Minister of Higher Education and Research, but that was a deal we had pertaining to human rights. And it didn't last for very long. No, on human rights issues. But I've always resisted, so I told him, listen, I will accept provided we have 5 or 6 women with me in the cabinet, at least. So we can have enough women, not just the token woman, not just the superwoman. Because he told Jimmy Carter, I have Hanan, she's worth 10 men, that's all I need. And I said, no, don't use me as an excuse to exclude women. So I said, okay, I can give you names of women, and I gave him names of women candidates to be in the cabinet. And the men sitting there started saying, well, what is their history of struggle? What is their education? Did they go to prison? What is their standing? I said, do you have all these requirements of all these men who are cabinet members? Or when it comes to women, they have to withstand the test of perfection, not even excellence, to qualify. So you have to challenge these not just preconceptions about women, but these restrictions. I told many American friends that you may have glass ceilings, but we had to fight against stone walls sometimes, brick walls. But we do have a thriving women's movement, and we do have women's organizations that are quite aware and quite intrusive and resistant to oppression. We have now many women in the cabinet. We had at one point 7 women, but now there are fewer. And we have women judges. We have the head of the Statistical Bureau is a woman. The head of one of our major economic institutions is a woman. So we have been making inroads, but not enough. And we cannot sit back and be happy that finally some women are in their rightful place. We need to have not just qualitative, but quantitative participation at the decision-making level, both politically and economically, and not just in social transformation and justice.
So may I ask you one quick final question? Do you have any message for the young people? Because here at Brown University, we take great pride in our undergraduate students who are exceptional.
Yeah,
do you have any message for them?
No, I've known of Brown undergraduate students, and I know many of them. And I think one thing what my father told me is do not accept imposed restrictions. It's important to know that the individual can make a difference, and never underestimate the power of commitment and the intellect, of course, and to be able to engage and to know that you're not alone. I think women as well as young people have to feel that there are support systems out there for them, that they're not as vulnerable as they think. Vulnerability and feeling exposed and alone can lead to inaction or timidity. But no, there are support systems, there are role models, there are people out there who will help and who will provide, I don't want to say the protection, but the framework within which you can move freely. And the world needs you. If the world is satisfied with people my generation, then we're in serious trouble. It's the young who have the gift of challenge, excitement, exploration, taking risks. That's important. That's how the world is changed.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Cool Library of the Watson Institute.
Thank you for having me.
We're very happy to have you here as a guest at Brown University.
It's my pleasure. I'm very happy to be here, Beshara.
Thank you.